I think we'll go ahead and get started today. I know I did not get the agenda for next week published, but we'll be looking at some bridge naming bills, and I'll get the rest of it set up probably on Tuesday, and I'll get the rest of it set up as soon as I can. With that, we're going to reopen the hearing for the continuation on Senate Bill 379. I think we're all fairly still fresh with that. We probably won't need a refresher from Adam, so we'll go right on to our first person, Ariel Wolf. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chairman, Vice Chair Clays, members of the committee. Good morning. My name is Ariel Wolf. I serve as General Counsel to the Autonomous Vehicle Industry Association. Thank you very much for the opportunity to testify in opposition to SB 379. Now, by way of background, very quickly, the AV Industry Association was formed in 2016 and includes more than 15 of the world's leading autonomous vehicle companies. Our diverse membership hails from the automotive, technology, trucking, and transportation network sectors, really across the economy, across the transportation industry and the sectors, showing the importance of this technology to the country. The association's concern with SB 379 is that the bill would prohibit the operation of AV technology outside of a very, very narrow use case defined as the middle mile. Such an approach to AV regulation would make Kansas stand alone among all U.S. states by expressly denying an entire technology ecosystem from operating in Kansas, other than allowing, at this time, a single company's limited operations. The bill as currently written would deny Kansas the substantial safety, mobility, and supply chain efficiency and environmental benefits that AVs are already providing across the country. And so we therefore must oppose this bill in its current construction. Now, I provided some written testimony and respectfully urge the members to, at your discretion, to take a look at that. So I'd like to make a few brief points in addition to that at this time. The first is just a personal note. I did fly in from Washington, D.C. last night, but on a personal note, my very first job was to work for Senator Brown back in D.C. and work for the people of Kansas for 5 years. I travel the roads of this state and care deeply about it, have relationships and friendships with people across the state. So this is both professional and personal for me. The second is just a note about what technology we're talking about, because this is a conversation we're having across the country. Autonomous vehicle technology is designed and developed to not have a human involved in the driving task at all. It is different than what we hear about and read about with respect to driver assist technology. Many of us have that in our cars today, whether it's Tesla or others. That technology, which expects a licensed human driver to be attentive at the wheel, is a different industry. It's a different technology. It's a different use case. We're talking about technology that does not in any way expect a human to be involved. And the reason why that's important, which is the second point here, is that technology, autonomous vehicles, is here today and it's solving some key problems and issues that we face across the country. The first, of course, is safety. We have an epidemic, a crisis on our roads today. More than 40,000 people lose their lives, and it's getting worse. And what has been repeated and is factually correct, the U.S. Department of Transportation has said, is that the overwhelming majority of fatal crashes and serious injuries involve at least one human behavioral factor as the cause. That could be distracted driving, impaired driving, asleep at the wheel, and so forth. And so autonomous vehicle technology, first and foremost, was created and is intended to solve for that human behavioral issue. And if we were able to get it deployed widely across the country, it could really save a lot of lives. The second point is on the supply chain. Autonomous vehicle technology is in trucks today, hauling freight in Texas, New Mexico, elsewhere around the country. We have a supply chain crisis that in large part is driven by a truck driver shortage, estimated to be 80,000 drivers short at this time and expected to grow over 100,000. Autonomous vehicle technology, autonomous trucks can complement and work in concert with that ecosystem to solve those issues. And then autonomous vehicle technology has the ability to solve issues related to expanding access for mobility to seniors and to individuals with disabilities and those who may not be able to obtain a driver's license. That's what this technology, among many other benefits, is here to solve. I'll just mention one other thing on the supply chain piece. Autonomous trucks, because they are not restricted to rest breaks and biological breaks and so forth, have the ability to expand agricultural markets and reduce spoilage. And studies have shown that potential as well, in addition to fuel savings. So, members of the committee, Mr. Chairman, in conclusion, I would just note, circling back to this legislation, the bill would make Kansas a far outlier on its own by restricting access to this technology. Autonomous cars, autonomous trucks, last mile delivery would not be able to come to Kansas if this bill were enacted, and we have deep concerns with that. Now, we want to work with the committee very much on how to have a path forward here. We have model legislation. We want to work, and we appreciate the time and attention this committee has given to this important issue. And then finally, just note, since Tuesday, there's been a little bit more opposition, letters coming in. I'm not sure if they've made its way to the committee, and happy to provide copies of that as well from other associations and companies, including one in our group, Kodiak Robotics, General Counsel. It's an autonomous truck company. He's a native son of Kansas, wanted me to make sure to provide his thoughts as well, which I can provide in writing. So with that, happy to answer any questions at this time or any other time. Thank you so much.
Since you're the only one here in person, we'll take questions from you now, and then we'll move to the WebEx. Committee questions. See none? Thank you. Now turn our attention to Jacky Beckwith, Manager AUVSI.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Yes, sir, I am. I'm here. Hi, good morning. Thank you so much for the opportunity to testify. I'm thrilled to be in front of you all this morning, and I appreciate the chance. So my name is Jacky Beckwith. I am here on behalf of the Association for Unmanned Vehicle Systems International, or AUVSI. It's quite the long acronym. I work with and represent companies developing automated goods movement technologies. So in automated trucks, low-speed on-road delivery devices, and warehouse yard robotics. I'm also here to urge you to vote no on Senate Bill 379 for a couple reasons, many of which you all have already heard, but we appreciate the time. So the bill as written now would, of course, permit operations for a very narrow use case. And the fact of the matter is that the use case is so narrow that it would disallow operations for almost every AV company. And putting competitive fairness aside, allowing this bill to move forward would dramatically shrink the mobility and goods benefits that broader AVs offer. Second, by so stringently limiting the operation of automated vehicles in Kansas, this bill would actually disadvantage businesses who want to benefit from using the different types of automated goods movement technologies to increase productivity, to augment the workforce, to reach new markets. These systems are able to deliver on those benefits and will continue to be able to do so in the years ahead, but only if these businesses can access these new types of technology. For instance, as was mentioned, there are automated shuttle companies that are dedicated to increasing mobility for seniors, taking them to and from community centers and doctor's appointments. There are companies that work with movement of groceries and going from stores and retailers directly to folks' doorsteps to increase access to groceries. And this bill, unfortunately, would not let either one of those use cases as examples move forward. Finally, I also submitted written testimony ahead of this hearing, and there are some interesting questions around legal ambiguity when it comes to the U.S. Supreme Court's protection of interstate commerce because of this middle mile definition that I think is worth looking into. We would love to work with all of you and all stakeholders, including State Highway Patrol, local law enforcement, first responders, local elected officials, including the League of Municipalities, to find a path forward. AVs are really, really exciting, and we congratulate this committee and the state for being so excited about this stuff. And we want to work with you all and have us at the seat at the table and let everybody kind of share their opinions. So I know I've had some conversations with some of you already, and I really appreciate that time. I am confident we can, find a path forward, and thank you all for the consideration of our comments.
Thank you. Committee questions. Seeing none, thank you, Jackie. Next up, we have Are you online? Ruthie, can you hear us? We're not getting anything.
I'm sorry. I'm here. It blinked out for a minute and I couldn't hear my name, so I wasn't sure who you were calling on, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to share TechNet's perspective on SB 379. My name is Ruthie Barco. I represent TechNet Central Region. TechNet is a national bipartisan network of innovation economy CEOs and senior executives. Our diverse membership represents over 4 million employees and countless customers in the fields of information technology, e-commerce, the sharing and gig economies, advanced energy, cybersecurity, venture capital, and finance. On behalf of TechNet and its membership, we must also respectfully oppose SB 379. We encourage lawmakers to pursue a balanced approach to building the legal governing autonomous vehicles in the state of Kansas. Accordingly, we must oppose the SB 379 as currently drafted because it creates a framework for autonomous vehicles in Kansas that will limit the operation of this technology to only one segment of innovators and consumers. Section 3, paragraph A, specifically limits the operation of autonomous vehicle technology in Kansas only to commercial B2B transport that is also interstate and conducted on the middle mile. While we oppose SB 379 in its current form, we're eager to work with the committee in crafting autonomous vehicle policy that does not lock Kansas into a single, highly limited, intrastate use case for autonomous vehicles. Such an approach would severely restrict both competition and the state's ability to realize the many safety, efficiency, and economic benefits of autonomous vehicles. TechNet urges the committee to consider amending SB 379 to avoid these negative ramifications and stands ready to partner with the committee in creating balanced autonomous vehicle policy in Kansas that would encourage competition, investment, and innovation. Thank you for your time today, and we look forward to our continued engagement on this important issue. I'm happy to answer any questions from the committee.
Committee questions for Jackie? Seeing none, thank you. Ruthie, excuse me. Next up, we have Daniel Henkle, Kansas Trial Lawyers. Are you online?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Daniel Henkle, and I'm the Senior State Affairs Counsel for the American Association for Justice. I have followed and testified on state and federal legislation regarding automated vehicles around the country, and I'm invited by the Kansas trial lawyers to testify today in opposition to SB 379. To be clear, the Kansas Trial Lawyers, KTLA, supports the deployment of AVs onto Kansas roads as long as it is done without compromising safety and accountability. KTLA cannot support the bill right now, but we appreciate the openness to finding a solution to these issues in automated driving. And I'm deeply sympathetic to the position you all are in today, because I was in the same place 6 years ago when I started working on this issue. There are a lot of things about automated driving that we can and should talk about, and I'm happy to answer questions on, but there is one big thing that we need to talk about, and I'm going to focus my testimony on. Automated driving is more than a technology. Automated driving is a promise. It is a promise from the manufacturer of those systems that they will operate a vehicle safely on the highways. Now, you saw Mr. Wolf testify to this, and all of the other benefits that have been testified to about AVs are derivative of safety. I think we can use Gaddick as a good example to talk about this, because Gaddick built the system, the automated driving system that they're using in their vehicles. Only Gaddick can decide when their system is safe enough to operate without active human oversight. Now, they are the only one who knows the way their system operates, and they're the only one who can say when they are safe to use. Now, Gaddick has promised Walmart that their driving system is safe. Gaddick has promised you, and by implication all of Kansas, that their driving system is safe in their testimony last week. The one big question for legislation, in any legislation around automated driving, is whether they will be held accountable for that promise. Under the legislation as drafted, the answer is no, not necessarily. Under the language of the bill, it is unclear who is responsible for the safe operation of these vehicles. Now, Section 4 says that the owner is responsible for assessing the compliance with applicable traffic laws, but as the Law Enforcement Association testified to, we're not totally sure what that means. Section 3 requires certain conditions to be met in order to operate an automated vehicle, but it doesn't require anybody to certify that or clarify that. But even if we assume that what this means is the owner is responsible for the safe operation of the vehicle, that is woefully inadequate. The owner could be anyone or no one. It could be a shell company with a P.O. box in Delaware. The owner has no idea if that system is safe, and the owner may have no ability to fix it if it is not safe. I know there was testimony that GADEC owns these particular trucks, and presumably that means that they aren't opposed to being accountable for the operation of these vehicles, and that's good. But whether a developer happens to own the vehicles and that particular system is attached to is fleeting. It could be gone tomorrow. It could be sold off to a shell company. There are just too many games that can be played when you make the owner the responsible party. Deterrence only works when there's a feedback loop. If I touch an electric fence and the shot goes to a P.O. box in Delaware, that's not much of an electric fence. The company who is responsible for the operation of these vehicles through the use of an automated driving system, the company that certifies to the requirements in Section 3 that it's capable of following the rules of the road and navigating railway stops, they should be the operator under Kansas. These companies developing this technology are saying, trust us. But trust depends on accountability. The company who builds these systems opposes being held accountable when they run a red light or they hurt somebody. It's hard to see how we should trust them when they make their promises that the systems are safe. We all want to trust GADEC. We all want to trust that these companies promising this technology is going to be safe. To earn that trust, they need to be accountable for the promises that they make. Because if no one is accountable, then nobody's safe. As I said, KTLA supports the deployment of automated vehicles onto Kansas Road as long as it is done without compromising safety and accountability. We appreciate the openness to finding an elegant solution to this issue of accountable automated driving, and I'm happy to take your questions at the appropriate time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Committee questions? See none, thank you for providing your input.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Blake Shewart, Hutton and Hutton. Are you online?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Welcome to the committee.
Okay, can everybody see me?
We can hear you fine.
Okay, all right, I'll get started. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you very much for allowing me to appear before you this morning. My name is Blake Shewart. I am a civil attorney with the Hutton & Hutton law firm in Wichita, and I'm also a member of the Kansas Trial Lawyers Association. Mr. Henkle addressed some of our concerns, and I just want to address some of those same concerns and some different ones from a little bit different perspective. As Mr. Henkle said, we are not fundamentally against the implementation of automated motor vehicles, whether commercial or otherwise, in Kansas, understanding that this is a movement across the country that's in various states and various elements of operation at this point in time, and that remains ongoing. Our efforts are to look at the legislation and determine whether it adequately protects Kansans from a safety and an accountability standpoint. Our opposition to the bill at this point in time is based on the obvious multiple areas that are left entirely open and the questions that are left unanswered in this bill. Some of the most important ones are, number one, the definition of owner, defining the owner as a person who holds legal title or has possession or control of a vehicle. The definition looks innocuous enough, even if it's maybe not entirely consistent with other statutes that define owner. It looks innocuous enough when you look at it in the definitions section. But then when you get to the bottom of the bill in Section 4, and it states that the owner is considered the operator solely for the purpose of assessing compliance with applicable traffic laws, then you see that only the person who holds title or is controlling the vehicle will be held accountable, not the company that through its engineers and experts implemented, tested, controlled, regulated, inspected, and ultimately certified all of the hardware and software that are being used to operate the vehicle. So an additional element of this bill needs to be built in, talking about who the operator is and assessing certain requirements and elements of accountability for the operator to certify compliance to the state of Kansas that the software and hardware are capable of operating safely, and to stand behind that by being accountable in the event of an accident. The next item pertains to required financial security or insurance. That is currently discussed in section 3 of the bill under subsection B4. And currently, the bill as proposed keys the insurance requirements to KIRA, the Kansas Auto Insurance Reparations Act, formed in 1974 to provide minimum insurance accountability in Kansas. The per person bodily injury limits under the statute are $25,000, and the total per occurrence liability limits under that statute are $50,000. If you look at other states that have tackled this problem, such as Louisiana, which placed a requirement of $2 million for commercial autonomous motor vehicles. Nevada, which initially during the testing phase required $5 million of coverage. Tennessee, which when the bill was first passed a requirement of $5 million, and then that left that open for future assessment down the road. Other states that are looking at this problem are recognizing the importance of having these vehicles be adequately insured. During this phase of uncertainty, regardless of what promises might be made, Kansans need assurances that in the event this software isn't working as it should and there's a tragic accident, that there is sufficient insurance coverage. And the final item I'll discuss this morning relates to the sort of the safety and law enforcement aspect of the bill. Currently, there's no provision at all that, number one, defines minimal risk condition, other than to sort of have a bare bones definition. Our bill here that's proposed does require that these autonomous motor vehicles are able to achieve minimal risk conditions in the event of a failure. Other states, when they've looked at what is minimal risk condition, have actually defined that to talk about the requirement that if there's a failure, the vehicle can be removed to the nearest shoulder, brought to a complete stop, and the vehicle's emergency signal lamps will be operated. That sort of clarification would help ensure safety. And the last piece is what happens if there is an unfortunate accident. Currently, there's no requirement for the vehicle operator or owner to remain at the scene of an accident, comply with all provisions of state law with regard to contacting law enforcement and furnishing relevant information. That's a concern, I believe. Mr. Klump raised some initial concerns from a law enforcement perspective. We see those concerns, particularly with regard to accident reporting. Those are some of the most pronounced concerns with the bill from a legal perspective and from an attorney who works in this industry often. We are certainly open to discussing solutions to the problems. We appreciate being part of the conversation. Thank you for your time this morning, and I'm certainly happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Blake. Blake, is there any state that you has minimal risk definitions that you like?
Yes, I believe I will follow up with you, Mr. Chairman, in writing, but I believe I'm to a pretty high level of certainty can say that Iowa is one state that has a more robust definition of minimal risk condition.
Thank you. If you'd follow up with that and send it to the committee secretary, Florence, and that way it can be distributed to everybody, that would be appreciated.
I'd be happy to do so. Thank you.
Committee, further questions for Blake? Seeing none, thank you. Last on our list, we have Dr. Philip Copeman, Carnegie Mellon University. Are you on the line?
Yes, I am, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, Good morning. My name is Philip Copeman. I study and work on safety critical systems for a living, including working on autonomous vehicle AV safety for more than 25 years as a faculty member at Carnegie Mellon University. I'm also very active in both U.S. and international AV policy and standards. Thank you for allowing me to testify today as a safety advocate. I believe that a deliberate, safety-conscious approach to automated vehicles can improve roadway safety. However, I'm testifying opposed to SB 379 as written because it lacks some key safeguards needed for safely deploying the technology that is still in its early stages of maturation. After listening to the testimony of bill supporters, it has become clear that this is intended to be a narrow bill for middle-mile cargo transport. Starting slow and including stakeholders always helps for safety. Walmart and Gatik have made a case that they intend to deploy in an incremental, responsible manner. However, as was also stated, other companies can come in who might not have as measured an approach to deployment and safety. Or another company might acquire Gatik and change their operational procedures to be less conservative. Therefore, I hope that the bill will also provide some basic high-level checks and balances for the future. My specific recommendations in support of public safety cover three main points. Point one has to do with accountability. Ensure that the operators of any AV have an explicit duty of care to the public for safety. This duty of care should include required remote supervision of any uncrewed vehicle, which appears to be implicit in the discussion to this point, but I don't see written out specifically in the bill. Ideally, the duty of care should also include conformance to the SAE J3018 industry standard for crewed AV public road testing safety. This is a different SAE standard than the 3016 you heard about at the last hearing. 3018 is a safety standard, whereas 3016 is a terminology standard. J3018, the safety standard, provides general, flexible requirements for safety operator qualifications and responsible testing operations. Importantly, that standard incorporates lessons learned from the tragic Uber ATG testing fatality that took the life of a pedestrian in 2018 in Tempe, Arizona. SAE J3018 conformance helps make sure that the mistakes that led to that one fatality are not repeated on Kansas roads. Point number two has to do with transparency. Any AV operator should be required to commit to achieving a defined level of safety, such as, for example, substantially better than an average unimpaired human driver in comparable operating conditions. Transparency is crucial to assure safety. The AV operator can propose how they want to measure and demonstrate that level of safety as part of their testing. But the AV operators should be required to explain how safe they plan to be and provide data to support that they are actually achieving their promised safety goal throughout their operations. My final point three is there should be a figurative circuit breaker in case the unthinkable happens and there is a severe injury or fatality involving an AV operation in Kansas. Kansas DOT should be given explicit authority to stand down AV operations in connection with a crash or pattern of unreasonably risky behavior pending an investigation. It's important to realize that AV testing, deployment, and scaling is going to be a multi-year process. While it is completely understandable to want to keep this bill short and sweet, it's important to make sure that it contains basic checks and balances so that it does not need to be revisited in a hurry if conditions change or something goes wrong on the road. Summarizing, given the limited scope of operations intended by this bill, I recommend the bill include 1, ensuring AV operators are held accountable for safety, 2, requiring transparency as to the intended level of safety with ongoing data reporting for safety outcomes, and 3, giving KDOT explicit authority to pause testing pending investigation in response to a crash or other concern for public safety. Thank you again for allowing me to testify today. I'm happy to answer questions at an appropriate time.
Thank you. Committee questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank
Hold
you, sir.
on, we got one. Senator Pittman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Copeman. One thing stood out is you said that standard should potentially be higher than a human could perform. Is that what I heard?
I was using that as an example, sir. My request is that there be a defined standard, but one standard that is very common is that safety during testing and during operation should be no worse than a human. And my personal preference is no worse than an unimpaired human, taking into account local conditions.
Sure, thanks.
Committee, further questions? Senator Powell.
I'm not sure who can answer this question, but what are the procedures in Kansas that are in place for licensure for AV operators or training?
I don't know. We would have, Jill, do you have any idea on that?
Do any of the people that testified today know of any licensure or operator training required in the states that are currently operating AVs?
Jill Shelley, Legislative Research. In the few states that I have looked up, the common standard is as a licensed driver for the type of vehicle that's being operated.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So there's no special license for an AV operator?
I have not run across that.
Thank you.
Committee, further questions? Seeing none, we'll close the hearing on Senate Bill 379. Committee, I do intend to encourage the parties to get together some and try and work something out on this. I do know that I would not probably let this bill go out unless there is a minimum of driver safety training and some weight limits. We've heard a lot of other things that we need to take a look at. Our time is limited, so we're moving forward. Committee, next week, the agenda did not get put out. We will get it out sometime today. I do intend to work a couple of highway naming bills on Tuesday. Will be limited time, but we'll go that. With that, we are adjourned.